Hello, everybody, and my name is Mark Moyer, and we're going to talk today about how to network your way into your dream job, and really how to get in front of the right people. I mean, it's easy enough to get in front of some other people sometimes, but really finding the right people is the critical way to do this, right? So that is the absolute thing to do, is to get in front of the right people. Now, here I am, Mark Moyer. I'm a career strategist, executive recruiter, which I've done for a long time. I am a certified career coach, and I do like to speak in front of people. So I guess before I go too much further, I'd love to know if why don't you go ahead and put in the box here if you're excited about getting some great tips, if you're looking forward to figuring out what's next for you. And what we're going to do is I'm going to throw a quick poll out for you. I'd love to see your answers for this one here. Um, and let's see if we can get to the right one here. Give me one sec here. All right, and let's see if I can find those for you. Well, it looks like I've got a poll that I didn't want to have in here. So why don't you go ahead and answer from me? I'd love for you to put in the in this poll box or in the chat room. I'd like you to talk to me about how strong of a networker you feel you are. Put in there if you are a strong networker, if you love working a room, or if you don't necessarily like to work a room, but you will talk to people if you have to, or if you really dread sort of talking to people, but you will if you absolutely need to, or if you just won't bother talking to people at all, especially about the work environment. So why don't you go ahead and put in the box there. I'd love to see how you feel about your own networking skills and where you think those will hopefully develop as we go forward on this in this webinar. Now, I'm going to be holding another webinar because I love doing these series. They're pretty good. So the next one we're going to be doing is 2 weeks from today, February 24th, and it's going to be how to leverage your connections into interviews. And I'm going to limit it to only 50 people. We're going to really blast this out so it gets a big promotion, and then I'm going to tie it into just 50 people. It keeps it kind of tight. Now, you'll find out shortly is that throughout the course of this webinar, you'll learn how to make connections, and you'll learn how to make them in ways you never thought possible. But really, it's all well and good, except how do you take those connections and really turn them into meetings and then interviews? So look, bottom line, try to be on this webinar, and you'll learn a tremendous amount. So real quickly, who am I? Why am I doing this? Well, look, I've been a recruiter for a long time, and for the past 20 years, I've been giving professionals just like you a whole bunch of tips and strategies. And it's my feeling that I might somehow have a bit of a gift of being able to actually show people and tell people a lot of the lessons I've learned over the years. But the lessons that I've learned that really get people the jobs they want to be in, and really get it in a way that's quick and fast, and not similar to these outplacement firms that have you come in and just sort of sit and hang out in a cubicle and play solitaire and do whatever you do. So look, I love doing this stuff. It's really my passion. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and show you who the heck I am. Here I am, live in person here in New York City. And just a quick story about myself and how I got going with this whole madness. Really, it was a year out of school, and I just spent a year out in California. And at the time, I was visiting a buddy, and he said, "Come on out to LA. We'll hang out with the girls. We'll have some fun." And I said, "Well, that sounds pretty good." So I hopped in my car. I drove out there. And by the time I got out there, he decided that he didn't want to have fun anymore. He was studying for his LSATs. So I ended up anyway having a fair amount of fun. But after about a year or so, I said, well, geez, I've got to get out of this gig. I've got to leave this place. It's just dragging me down. So I came back to New York City. And when I got back here, I found some 3 of my fraternity brothers to live with in a house in Queens. And, they had jobs, but I did not have a job. And so I was looking. But back in those days, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have ways to actually get jobs other than literally writing a letter or making some phone calls. So one day I'm hanging out trying to figure out, well, what's a great way to get a job? And the phone rings. So I answered and I said, hi, it's Mark. And the lady says, well, look, I'm looking for Tom. And I said, well, Tom's not here. He moved out. I took his place. And she says, well, I've got an interview for him. I'm a recruiter and I need to send him on an interview. And I said, well, I have no way to find him. I don't have there's no such thing as cell phones back then. So I said, I don't know where he is. So she said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm actually looking. She said, oh, you are? Well, where'd you go to school? I said, well, I went to Colgate University. She said, oh, that's a fine university. That's a great school. Are you, would you be interested in maybe going on this interview? I said, well, maybe, I guess. What kind of job is it? And she said, it's in sales. Do you want to do sales? I'm like, sure, I'd love to do sales. But look, I went on it. I ended up, it was a job to sell photocopiers here in the city, door to door. And that was a dreadful, dreadful job. It was a really challenging job. But I must tell you, I learned everything. I learned everything in that one job. But after that, I got a job in advertising, doing sales. And then after that, the magazine I was working for folded. No pun intended. So anyway, that job is out of the picture. I'm thinking, well, I'm looking through New York Times, looking for another job. This is now about almost 28 years ago. And I obviously started working when I was 9 years old, right? Anyway, don't do the math. So I was looking through New York Times and I see an ad and it says in there, a recruiting firm looking for somebody in their banking group. And I was like, aha, light bulb went off. I'm going to go to that job, get hired there. And then as a recruiter, the first time a good job in banking comes along, I'm just going to go myself. Brilliant idea, right? But then when I got there and I started working as a recruiter for a little while, I realized, wow, all these other recruiters, they're making some pretty good money. And they're not really working that hard. And my buddies at some of the big investment banks, they're working their tail off and they're really smart people. So I made the decision then. I thought, well, you know what? I can hang out with these other recruiters. They're not that bright. I'm not that bright necessarily. Perfect fit. Well, after that, I ended up going to that firm. I stayed there for a couple of years. I went to a different firm and I stayed there for a long time. I was there for almost 19 years. And I learned a tremendous amount as an executive recruiter. It was fabulous. But over that course of that time, I started realizing, geez, I spent a lot of my time giving advice to people. I'm telling people how to do their resumes, how to interview, how to network, how to make the right decisions that will get them the offer, right? Because as a recruiter, I wanted to generate a fee, and the way to do that is getting an offer. So what did I do? I was moving right along there, making a pretty good living. It was great. And then along comes the crash and Lehman Brothers back in 07 and 08 when the market just fell apart and nobody was hiring, nobody was paying fees. I went to the owner of my firm and I said to him, listen, we can provide outplacement services. We'll get paid by our financial services clients like Citigroup and so on. If they lay people off, they'll pay us money to help place those people. Well, he didn't want to do that. And I was spending my days giving advice to people and giving more advice and more advice. And I was getting frustrated because I wasn't earning a living, but I was making these other people happy with the advice I was giving them. And then one day, poof, I was talking to this woman and she was blabbing away and I was blabbing away. And finally I blurted out. I said, oh, I'm so tired of giving this advice. God, I should charge you for this. And she said, well, you should because I pay you. I was like, what? And that was the big light bulb moment. So several years ago, I went ahead and got certified as a career coach. I went through the 5 o'clock club, which I found at the time to be the best methodology that followed my sort of prescription, which was really quite the aggressive mentality. As a recruiter, I'm always anxious to place people in jobs, but also make sure that they stay there, right? And so I've really brought that along into my coaching where I am absolutely anxious to get you into your dream job as fast as possible. Wow, that line almost sounded like it was from a debate, right? Let's see how many times I say it again in this webinar. But that is the serious thing, is that I am absolutely committed to doing things as quickly as possible, but getting you in the right position that you really want to be in. So that's been my mantra all along. So about 5 years ago, I decided I hated sharing my money with other people, well, at least my coworkers. So I decided to start my own firm. And since that time, I've been really splitting my time between the recruiting and the coaching. My passion is absolutely the coaching, and the recruiting certainly pays a bunch of the bills. So it's been a sort of a split deal there. But what I've found is that by combining my skill set within the recruiting field and the coaching, it really is sort of it's a great combination for me to be able to really give some great advice about doing the job search. So that's my story. This is who I am, and let's get on with the program. So now I got to make sure I click the right buttons here. So I'm going to screen share, and we're going to get that started again. Here we go. And all right, let's see if I do this correctly here. Start screen share. Here we go. So we've gone through this, who am I and what am I doing this? Why am I doing this, right? So in terms of networking itself and how you communicate with colleagues, friends, and family, I'm going to throw out a few of these, and you can let me know in the box to your right, which of these seem to apply to you. And, really the first one is, are you completely uncomfortable approaching strangers or even your friends, your family about your job search? I mean, do you feel that your sense of pride really blocks you from reaching out? I mean, you've already attained a lot in your career, but you feel really kind of weird about connecting with other people and asking them about job search advice. And do you sort of feel a bit vulnerable after having been so successful for such a long period of career? I mean, lots of people are like this. They just don't like approaching strangers or even their friends and family and former colleagues about this. Or have you been unable to pick up the phone? Do you just feel really uncomfortable talking to people about your job search? Or are you really uncomfortable sending out LinkedIn invitations? Or even, as we said earlier, making the rounds at events, walking around and shaking hands? Or, you know what? Do you wish you were a type A networker, even though you don't have that type A personality? I've got a friend of mine. He is incredible. Everywhere he goes, he's shaking hands. He's running for mayor, it seems like. He knows everybody, talks to everybody, introduces everybody. It's absolutely amazing how good he is. And I'm envious because, quite frankly, I'm not like that at all. And I know people don't believe me when I say that, but it's absolutely true. I am not that type of person. In fact, if you put me in a room full of strangers, I'm just as happy grabbing a beer and watching the TV over the bar or whatever it is. I'm not the type to walk around and introduce myself. And people don't believe me. They say, Mark, you've done stand-up comedy, you've done these webinars, you speak to lots of people live and so forth. Well, I do that, and I actually enjoy that aspect, but put me in a room full of strangers that don't necessarily have a connection with me, and I'm not as comfortable with that. So these are some of the tips and strategies and secrets that I've learned throughout the years that you'll be learning now. So what will you learn today? Well, one of the things we'll talk about is how to figure out who the hiring managers are, who the key influencers, the decision makers, people in HR, executive recruiters. Who are the people that are directly connected to the dream jobs that you want to be in? So in a previous webinar, we talked about how to figure out what that dream job is. So now you have a list of your dream positions and ideally a target list of companies you'd love to work at. So we'll learn how to figure out who these people are. We'll also learn how to connect directly with those professionals and set up the calls and the casual meetings that lead to those interviews and offers. We're also going to learn today how you can showcase what you bring to the table to those connections. I mean, after all, this is why you get hired. You get hired because of what you bring to the table and how it's going to contribute to that position in that company going forward. Keep in mind, when a manager is looking to hire someone and they interview you and they look at your resume and your past history, do they really care about the things you've done in the past? Not really. They only care about how it's going to impact the job that you do going forward, right? They don't care about the past. I mean, you could talk about the past over a drink sometime or whatever it is, but they don't care about that. They only care about what you're going to do for them going forward. So it's critical that you learn to be able to showcase what you bring to the table to them. Now, I'm also going to show you a little bit later what the tried and true way to get them to be interested in you before they even catch a whiff of your resume. And look, I've got to tell you, if you don't know it yet, you're going to soon learn that I absolutely hate resumes. I hate them. They're such a horrible, in my opinion, way to effectively sell your candidacy. It's really amazing how it's just a two-dimensional piece of paper that really doesn't talk about you. And I want to be careful because I have lots of friends and other people I know that spend a lot of time on their resumes and making sure you have a perfectly professional resume. So I'm going to try not to, denigrate them too much, but I'm not a big fan of that. So look, it's critical, in my opinion, to get hiring managers interested in you before they even see that resume. So quickly, a couple of webinar guidelines. One is every once in a while, I'll be stopping for questions. Obviously, as you've already started to do, please feel free to enter any questions in the chat box on the right. And every once in a while, I'll take a peek over there and we'll get things rolling and answer a few of those. If any of you do experience any sounds or visual issues, hey, you know what? It's not necessarily me, it's you. That sounds like George Costanza or the opposite. But we'll have someone else take a look at that at some point. But try to, it's not something I'll be able to tackle while we're doing this. Also, at the end of the webinar, I'll post a link to the upcoming webinar. But also, we'll also make available to you my checklist that I've put out, 10 networking tips that really put you ahead of your competition. And that's a 2-page document, a PDF. It's a great checklist that you can go through and keep reminding yourself of ways that you can network that'll really put you ahead of everybody else. That's a great thing to. So let's talk about some numbers and why we should be networking instead of doing things other ways. As much as it saddens me to say this, and I won't cry right now, but I will tell you that especially in this cruddy market, and I hope you all realize that it's a cruddy market, and if you don't, then God bless you, but for the most part, the economy is not exactly cranking. The unemployment rate is not 4.9%. It's more like 28% because if you take into account the people that are completely off the grid, or people that are underemployed or consulting, it's a much higher rate. But just to get in some more numbers, only 5 to 8% of all the jobs that are being filled in this market are as a result of using an executive recruiter, an employment agency, using somebody like myself to get you into a company. A very small percentage of all the jobs are being filled that way. So whenever you see advertisements from recruiters, or if they chase you down, they don't have a corner on the market, obviously. Doesn't mean they're not a great tool to use. And quite frankly, if you have the opportunity to use a recruiter to get you in someplace, it saves you a lot of headaches, but it can create some other ones. But just a very small percentage of them are filled that way. Only 10 to 12%, I promise you. And studies have shown, whether it's Simply Hired had a study, LinkedIn has done some, and so has Indeed. Only 10 to 12% of all jobs are being filled by the job boards or the corporate websites and online ads. That's it. It's not more than that, and it's really unfortunate, but only 10 to 12%. And Simply Hired did say that an average of 1,000 applicants per job posting. Now, some of the ones that you might be applying to are going to be less. It may be 50 or 100, but they're all out there and they're all applying, I promise you. So keep that number in mind. Now, even more crazy, someone else put out a study that showed that every job that you get excited about seeing has been posted on an average of 18 job boards or corporate sites, recruiter sites, etc. And when I show you that you have a 1 in 10,000 chance of being hired that way, if you think about it, if only 10% of jobs are being filled that way, and if there are 1,000 applicants per job posting, that's 1 in 10,000, and that's not a good chance. I'd rather roll the dice with the lottery, right? So even worse, whenever you see a job posted online, and listen, 95% of job seekers are like this. They wake up in the morning, they get all fired up to apply for a job. They go online, they see a bunch of job postings that they say, hey, I can do that. Yeah. I mean, it's not what I'd love to do, but I can do that. So what do? They go ahead and apply, right? But do you ever wonder why the heck you almost never hear back from those resume submissions? I mean, do you ever, how many of you have applied online and not actually heard back? I mean, have any of you actually applied and, sort of it gone into the black hole? I'd love to see if that's happened to you. I mean, it's really amazing how that continues to be a way that people apply, but that's just the way it goes. It's the way the market is. And I'd love to throw out there, I'd love for you to tell me, do you have any idea how many of these positions have already been filled by the time you see them posted? I mean, think about it. This is how the progression goes. Okay. It'll go like this. I'm the hiring manager. Okay. And Bob knocks on my door and he says, hey, Mark, I quit. I'm out of here. And I say, oh gosh, well, sorry to hear that, Bob. What am I going to do now? So I managed to go out and I say, well, you know what? I think what I'm going to have to do is, I don't know, maybe I'll ask my colleagues, my other team members, who they know out there. So I'm going to say, everybody, do you have anybody you know out there that you like? Now, maybe I already checked my desk drawer and maybe I haven't seen any resumes in there that really got my attention, but maybe I did. Or I'm asking somebody else. Maybe somebody comes in and says, hey, Mark, guess what? There's this awesome lady, Julie. I met her on the train the other day. She knows the guy who cuts my lawn because he's taught by a tutor who teaches piano with it, whatever the connection is. So I decide to bring her in. And I say, wow, Julie is awesome. I meet Julie. I like her. My team likes her. Everybody likes her. I want to extend her an offer. I call up Human Resources. Hello, Human Resources. I want to extend an offer to Julie. Well, guess what? Julie can't get the job yet. HR says, nuh-uh, not so fast. You've got to post this online. Oh, Christ's sake, really? You have to post online? Yes. So what happens? It gets posted online. And then what happens? Nothing. Because I've got it posted online. I'm not actually paying attention to any of the respondees. I want to hire Julie. So I end up hiring Julie. But meanwhile, all those people that replied to the job posting are all excited because they're all perfect fits, right? But what happens? Nothing. Nothing at all. Because those perfect fits never get seen by me. I'm hiring Julie. So again, a vast percentage of these positions don't get filled this way. So how do they all get filled? Well, they all get filled by the obvious. 80% of all jobs in this market are being filled by the hiring managers who actually knew the candidate before the opening even existed. What do I mean by that? Well, it turns out that if Julie met me before before Bob came in and quit, and I had a resume in my desk drawer, well, then when Bob comes in and quits, boom, I reach out to Julie and there we're off and running. So 80% of all jobs are being filled this way. And it's going to be not just who you know or being in the right place at the right time, but being in the right place all the time. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that. So look, it's absolutely critical for you to leapfrog your competition and become a top level networker. But how, right? So here we go. A quick story about networking and how it's critical. Back in about 6, 7, 8 years ago, before I started my own firm, I was thinking about going in-house. And I decided, well, gee, I want to be a corporate recruiter. So what kind of industry do I want to be in? I decided to be in banking. So because that was the area I was recruiting in. So the first thing I did was I decided, well, look, maybe Capital One would be a fun bank to work for. They have great commercials, right? So I reached out to Colgate University, my alumni, where I went to school, and I said, look, do you have a list of any of the alumni that work at Capital One? And they said, sure, here's 2 names and their email and phone numbers. Now, back then, they didn't give us what their actual position was, just the contact info. I reached out to both. One guy called me back, said he was a bank teller down in South Carolina. Not going to be too helpful. But the other guy, he replied back and said, look, I'll arrange an appointment with my secretary, my assistant, and we'll go from there. Great, fabulous. Then I looked up his name on LinkedIn. And what did I find out? This guy happened to be the #1 person for Capital One in New York City. He was the top of the pyramid in New York. And I couldn't believe that I was going to have a meeting with him. And the only reason he was meeting with me was because I reached out and I used my affiliation with Colgate. We were both Colgate grads. So I went ahead and met with him for about an hour in a conference room. We had a great meeting. We talked about good old days at Colgate. We talked about all kinds of things. And at the end of the meeting, he said, Mark, if there's anything I can do for you here to help get you in, don't hesitate to let me know. Now, as it turned out, I decided not to continue within the in-house direction. But I'll never forget that, because it was something that, because I chose to try to reach out and use the connections, it got me a great meeting. So how the heck should we network? How do we do it? Well, look, here's the basics. I know you people have a tendency to think, well, what's in this for me? It's always thinking, well, what am I going to get out of this? Well, it is absolutely essential that when you are networking, try to think about what's in it for them, not what's in it for me. What's in it for them, okay? Put yourself in their shoes, in their mind, whatever it is, and anticipate what it is they want to hear, and try to put yourself in a position that makes them interested in wanting to continue the conversation with you. So again, always try to anticipate what's in it for them, all right? Also, I know this is maybe silly to say, but it's so critical. You know, we've all heard the thing how we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth and that sort of thing. Well, look, be a great listener. Focus on what they're saying and take notes. You know, make sure that you pick up the small details. Any comments that are made outside of the conversation box, right? Whether they talk about family stuff, whether they talk about traveling, or anything that you can refer to later that will make them remember you and you will remember them. So in a future conversation, you can say, hey, Jimmy, we talked about the Yankees last time, then their pitching staff, and how you used to hang out with Mariano Rivera, and anything that will trigger them to remember the conversation. It's essential that you just keep an eye and take great notes that way. Okay. Also, when I say ask, I implore you to don't ever be afraid to ask. Okay. What I mean by that, ask questions, ask for advice, ask for insight, ask for counsel, for phone calls, for meetings. You can even ask for interviews or even ask for the job, but don't be afraid to ask. I'm the king of someone who I try to always ask for something a little bit extra because people are reluctant to say no. So always make sure you ask, but at the same time, please make sure that you offer something in return. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if, for example, you have advice that you can give them on something they may need help with, or even offer to connect them with other people in your network, whether it's via LinkedIn or externally, but other people that can help them. But always keep in mind that people are going to be much more interested in really working with you and helping you out if they feel they're getting something in return. So again, always remember what's in it for them, really be a great listener and focus on what they're saying, and then make sure you always ask and offer something in return, right? Now, in terms of how do you find these people, and who are the right people to network with? who are the people that are the decision makers, the key influencers that are going to be the people that get you that next job. Well, what you need to do is start using your target list of companies that you'd love to work for. Start using LinkedIn as a research tool. Now, real quick verbal poll. Who out there is on LinkedIn and has a profile, but doesn't really send out too many invitations? Or if you are on LinkedIn, let me know if you send out lots of invitations, or let me know if you feel like you're a LinkedIn pro. But I'd love to hear about your interaction with LinkedIn. So go ahead and put that in the chat box as I talk. Now, LinkedIn is an amazing research tool. There's dozens and dozens of ways you can use it. You can find out more about the jobs you'd love to be in, the companies you'd love to work for, and you can see how other people describe what they do themselves. So let me know. I'd love to see if you're on LinkedIn and how much you use it. Now, the reason I love using LinkedIn is the research it allows me to do. And it really is amazing. And without being on LinkedIn right now to show you, I can just verbally tell you that you can look at a specific company and see how people describe what they do in their job descriptions. I like to see how people characterize what their responsibilities are, because a job description will often sort of write it in sort of a bland way, and maybe it's a way that either a hiring manager or a human resources professional or someone has described the position. But I'd like to see how the people that actually work there characterize it, right? Also, I think that you can find not just information about companies, but look at the types of people they like to hire, right? And see how you compare to them. So it's an amazing, amazing research tool, okay? Now, there are lots of ways to do this, but the best way is on the top of the search bar, just to the right of it, there's an advanced button. You click on advanced search, and then you put the name of the company you'd love to work for. If it might be, for example, I don't know, Morgan Stanley or Prudential or Coca-Cola. It can be any company name. And then also put in the name of the university you may have graduated from. In my case, it's Colgate, or wherever it might be. Or you can put in other keywords. So for example, if you like playing hockey, or you're an economist, or an accountant, or whatever you do, you can put these keywords in this advanced search button and then run a search. And what it will do is pop up a whole bunch of names of people that happen to have attended your university that also happen to work at Morgan Stanley, for example. It's really amazing how easy it is to find these people. You can also search within a group's members. So again, using the advanced search and the keywords. So if you've joined a group, whether it's an alumni group or a hobby-related group, or even a group that ties in what you do for a living, these are all ways that you can search within their group's membership to make connections with people that will directly impact your ability to get that next job, that dream job. Okay? So once you've run the search, how do you correctly connect with these people on LinkedIn? Well, obviously, you click on the connect button. I'm sure most of you know that already. And sometimes it will say, instead of connect, it'll ask you if you want to send them an in-mail. Don't do that. Instead, do the drop down within that part, and you'll see there's a word connect. Click on connect, and then I'll say, well, how do you know this guy, this person? How do you know Sean or Billy or Jim or Nancy? And you say, well, either you're a fellow classmate or you're a friend or whatever. But look, make sure you put in, if you don't pick the top couple of them, make sure you've done business with them. At the end of the day, they don't see how you suggest you know them. When they get that invitation, it doesn't say anymore, Bill went to school with you, or Bill used to work with you. It doesn't say that sort of thing. So you don't need to worry too much about which one you click, but don't click on other, and don't click on you don't know them, because then they'll ask you for their email address. So don't do that. And then The best and most important thing that I can't possibly underscore enough is that you must always personalize the invitation. Always. What do I mean by that? Well, look, first of all, delete that absolutely pathetic Mark, I'd like to join your professional, network on LinkedIn. Just get rid of that. Whenever I receive an invitation to connect and it's not personalized, I almost always delete it, because what that tells me is that that person didn't really care enough to actually bother to tell me why they want to connect with me or how they know me. They didn't bother with that. Also, when you personalize it, you're reestablishing how you conceptually have a bond with them. So, for example, if you both attended the same university, you can mention that in your personalization. If you both happen to play a sport, or you both enjoy the same type of hobby, or you both have the same political affiliation, whatever it might be, although I'm not a big fan of really getting too much into politics on LinkedIn and so on. But look, if you have a common bond with that person, leverage that in the invitation. So what happens is, in that invitation box, you're limited to 300 characters. So make sure you use those wisely. Okay, so for example, let's put one up. So here's one I like to use. Hello, Bob. As a fellow Colgate graduate, I thought you'd be a great person to connect with here on LinkedIn and ask for your advice and insight. Let's set up a call to introduce ourselves at your convenience. Hope all is great at Morgan Stanley, at your company. Regards, Mark. Now, if you think about it, if you are receiving that invitation to connect, and you get that email and it says, Mark would like to connect with you. And then you read the body and it says, hello, Bob, as a fellow Colgate graduate. Well, I promise you, if you're reading that, you're likely going to connect with a fellow university graduate, a fellow alumni, very strong bond. Or if they happen to be also a member of the ASPCA, a member of anything, whatever it might be, or a hockey enthusiast. The point is that when you mention what it is that you have a common bond with them, they're likely going to accept that invitation to connect. And when they do, what ends up happening is they'll get that invitation. They'll get the invitation that says either accept or view profile. Now, obviously, if they click on view profile, you'll want to make sure that your profile looks pretty darn good. And that's certainly the subject for another webinar, but it's critical that you have a very strong LinkedIn profile. But they may just click on accept. And if they click on accept, what ends up happening? They get sent off to a different screen that says, congratulations, you're now connected to Mark. And then here's some other people you might want to connect with. On the other hand, I get an email that says, congratulations, you're now connected to Bob. Here's some other people. But it'll also say, do you want to look at Bob's profile? Always click on yes, look at Bob's profile. You go to Bob's profile, and then what you do is you find his email address, which will now be under contact info because you're now first degree connections. You send him an email right away that says, thanks for connecting. And then you repeat it. Hey, Bob, just as a reminder, as I mentioned in that invitation to connect, we're both fellow Colgate graduates, and I'd love to get your advice and insight as I'm considering a transition at this time. We'd love to set up a call with you the next couple of days, maybe Tuesday or Thursday. What works best for you? Look forward to chatting. Regards, Mark. And then you're off and running with that connection. But make sure that you research their backgrounds and you find common bonds. Now, this particular example right here in front of you, what you can do is when you start devising your own personalizations, I encourage you to copy and paste those into a document, a Word document that you keep on your desktop, that anytime you go into LinkedIn and you want to make connections, you copy and paste those as needed. So this way you can make a search for all Colgate graduates that happen to be in finance, and then boom, 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 you send out 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, Bob. Hello, Nancy. Here. Hello, Jim. Hello, John. Hello, Sue. And all you need to do is change their name, and then hope all is great at their company. Change their company name, and you can send out 20, 30, 50 or more in an hour. And LinkedIn is a numbers game. You don't need to agonize over every invitation you send. All right. Just send them, because the more people you reach out to, the more people will accept your invitation. And then you're off and running, making those connections that will lead to your next job. Now, when you make that connection, run with it. What I mean by that, research their background, find out all the common bonds you can, read in it, and actually comment on any publications or videos that they've been a part of, any articles they've written on LinkedIn or elsewhere, or even if you have to just like it. But I encourage you to make comments and demonstrate your interest in them, because if you do that, as I mentioned earlier, they will absolutely be interested in you. So please make sure that you do that research before you start your conversation with them. Really get to know them as much as you can. All right. So what do you bring to the table? They may, once you start talking to them and you have that conversation, you discuss some things you may have in common, and you talk about, you sort of shoot the breeze a little bit. You may talk about whether it's sports or the university, whatever it might be. But at some point, you're going to have to start talking about what you bring to the table and why you're speaking to them. So make sure that you get comfortable with a 2 to 3 sentence blurb, verbal blurb, that really highlights your skill set and how you've transformed your current prior employers, and how you want to leverage that expertise in your next company. So you may want to say something to the effect of, for the past 20 years, I've been providing my clients with groundbreaking techniques and strategies that have allowed them to raise enough money, that have really caused them to fundraise an enormous amount for their charity. And it's something I'm very passionate about, and I can bring that skill set and those ideas to the next charity that would love to have me on board. Is there anybody you know that I should speak with? That's such a powerful way to talk to people. You talk about 2 or 3 sentences about yourself. I've spent the last 5 years doing ABC, and I've developed the expertise XYZ, and therefore I can bring it to your company, or I can bring it into a progressive firm that can really take advantage of those skills. It's really important that you get comfortable with a statement like that. Now, look, I've been throwing a lot at you, and yeah, obviously, not to make it sound however, but this has obviously been a free webinar, and I love doing these things. But look, for the most part, many of you may need to get an extra leg up on how to go about getting your dream job. Most people in this market, they settle for jobs. They react to what the job market is showing them and telling them. They're not being proactive, they're being reactive. So what happens? They're accepting jobs that they're really settling for. They're going online, they may be applying, or they go in for some interviews that they don't really want to be at, but they do that. And what I always tell people is, look, if you invest your time looking for jobs that you really aren't going to settle for, take that time instead and go after your dream jobs, okay? Now, probably many of you have been getting your advice for free, right? Whether it's from your friends, your family, your coworkers. I get it. And there's tons of free advice out there, but there's probably a reason why it's free. And it's not always the best advice. A lot of it's quite outdated. I'm sure lots of people will tell you, yeah, go online, apply to those jobs, apply to as many as you can, send out tons of resumes. Or maybe you're using a bunch of average job search strategies that are taught by outplacement recruiters, people that are really not in the game, or other career coaches that are using old techniques, and authors of books that are just old stuff, outdated resources, right? And you're using these resources from, I don't know, the government or community outreach or alumni organizations. Well, look, again, there's a reason why all this stuff is free. So my little quick pitch is that I'll tell you, look, the professionals that have gone through my program, not only have they been able to find out what their dream jobs are, but how to develop a list of people to network with that eventually lead them to the offers in those positions. And in my opinion, everyone deserves to know the secrets and the tips and strategies that only a handful of your competition really know. But you deserve to know those. I'd love it if you were the one getting the offer in your dream job. So if you've liked what you've been hearing so far today and you want to hear more of these webinars, please feel free to go onto my website, markmoyer.com, take a look at the programs that I've got involved for people just like you. These programs are designed to allow you access to these webinars going forward, or to allow you access to me being able to work with you on your LinkedIn profile, maybe even do a resume makeover, although my main makeover may not be the one you want to hear. But we can certainly talk about a variety of strategies that will get you in there. And I'm also obviously more than happy to talk to you about how the one-on-one coaching sessions work that will truly jumpstart your search. And as I say, guide you towards your dream job. In my opinion, everybody deserves to wake up in the morning fired up to go to work, right? So I appreciate you for being a part of this. In a second, I'm going to ask you, well, in fact, why don't you go ahead now and start posting in the chat box to the right some questions you might have that we can go through, and I can answer those. We still have a few minutes left. And I appreciate you staying with this webinar to the end. So in a few minutes after we've gone through these questions, I'll put a link in there that'll give you access to an important document that I believe is an invaluable tool to help you with a job search. It's a checklist of those 10 networking tips, and it's something that, again, you can print out and sort of keep handy with you and keep referencing. So I'll also send out an email later, either today or tomorrow, directly to you for an invitation to register for my upcoming webinar in a couple weeks, how to leverage your connections into interviews and eventually offers. So without further ado, please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the box. Now, some people like to say, I believe, one of you asked, well, I'm not exactly the youngest person anymore. I'm worried about being discriminated against because I've been out there a while. I'm in my 50s, my 60s, and I'm concerned that I'm being discriminated against based on my age. Well, guess what? You are. But guess what again? It's okay, because there are companies out there that would love to hire somebody with your level of expertise, your experience. And if you think about it, as long as you mention to them that you're not necessarily committed to becoming a senior manager or the top banana and so forth, they'd love to have someone of your seniority and your expertise in there. So there's lots of pluses to being a slightly older, we'll say, job seeker. All right. I know some people are asking me, well, how do I get past that hump of putting myself out there, right? How do I become that networker? How do I get out there? Look, I'm telling you right now, you could be the worst networker in the world. You could be sitting in your PJs behind this screen, and you can start sending out invitation after invitation. You can connect with an amazing array of senior level and mid-level professionals that you never dreamed you could be a part of. So, in my opinion, LinkedIn is the low-hanging fruit of networking. It is the best way to reach out to people, to make those connections, and then once you're off and running with those connections, you leverage them into meetings, which leads to interviews and eventually offers. If any of you have any additional questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to address them personally. And I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar. It's been great. I've had a lot of fun. If you have any comments, any ideas for me, I'd also love to see those. Feel free to throw those in the chat box. And lastly, here's my contact info. Whoops, there's my contact info. My email address, my phone number. Please don't hesitate to reach out. It's been a blast doing this. I really appreciate your time and your commitment to being a part of this. And once I stop broadcasting the screen share, I'll wave to you one more last little goodbye, and then I'll stop the broadcast, but I'll still put in the box on the right, the link that you can use to get the the checklist for the 10 networking tips. So here I am. Everyone have a great evening. Stay warm, stay dry, stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks again.